Michael Middleton.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hervé Ferrage, the Deputy Cultural Councillor of the French Embassy, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here tonight to the Payne Whitney Mansion, which has been the headquarters of French culture in the United States for more than 60 years now. Tonight we have two very special guests. The French Minister of Education, Jean-Michel Blanquer, and the Dean of the School of Education at Hunter College, which is one of our partners in education for French teachers in New York, one of our greatest partners here. And they are together for a very stimulating conversation on the topic education in the 21st century, what impact on our societies. I won't say you more because I think that Michael will have quite a long introduction about the topic and about what is at stake. So I hand over to him right away. Thank you very much and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Hervé. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Middleton, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Dean of the School of Education at Hunter College. And it is my extreme pleasure to welcome the Minister. So welcome tonight. And want to extend my thanks to Fabrice Jaumont and Hervé and the staff of the Embassy and the event staff for making tonight possible. So thank you to all of you as well. So we're here tonight to engage in a conversation about the current state of education and its impact on today's society. Society is changing quickly with increasing diversity in our citizenry, with shifting workforce and economic demands, and a rapidly evolving technology. And all of these changes relate to the way we educate, the way we form new knowledge, and the way we collaborate to mutually solve problems in our society. So as the UN General Assembly meets this week, it's fitting that we engage in a cross-national conversation about education. Hunter College was founded by Thomas Hunter, an Irish immigrant, based on two principles: equity and excellence. It was formed as a normal school where young women came to learn to be teachers. Hunter believed that no matter their religion or social class, women should have access to higher education. And he also believed that teacher preparation should be held to high standards of post-secondary preparation. Today at Hunter, under the leadership of President Jennifer J. Robb, we continue those beliefs in our work. We serve the city and region by producing teachers, school leaders, district leaders, and counselors who understand the needs of our community, who value the assets provided by our diverse citizenry, and have the skills and knowledge to make a difference. Under President Robb's leadership, Hunter remains a place where the American dream can happen, where equity and excellence guide our work. I want to acknowledge our bilingual education faculty. We have a faculty member here, Maite Sanchez. Hello, Maite. And other distinguished members of the Hunter faculty, but tonight's event is possible because of the hard work our faculty and the ministry staff have forged over the previous years. So tonight's event is due to that collaborative work. So with that, tonight I'm honored to share the stage with Jean-Michel Blanquet, the Minister of National Education in France. Mr. Blanquet's distinguished career in education and leadership began when he was a professor of public law at the University of Tours and at the Institute of Political Studies in Tours. He served as director of the Institute of Advanced Latin American Studies, rector of the Academy of Guyane and the Academy of Crute, and president of the prestigious ESSEC Business School. He previously held senior positions at the Ministry of National Education under both Gilles de Robien and Luc Chatel. He was appointed Minister of National Education in March of 2017 by Prime Minister Edouard Philippe at the beginning of Emmanuel Macron's presidency. His accomplishments in this short time have been significant, instituting the 4-day school week, smaller classes for elementary schools in high-need areas to improve reading and writing skills, and his controversial ban on cell phones. The new baccalaureate exam developed under his efforts is on track to be administered to graduating high school students in June of 2021 in response to the evolving needs of the educational and professional landscape in France. His motto as minister is École de Confiance, a school of trust. So tonight, I'll ask the minister a series of questions related to education and society in the 21st century. Following our question and answers, we'll invite members of the audience to ask the minister a few questions as well. So let's get started. Minister Blanquet, would you like to provide some opening remarks?
If it's possible. So, good evening to all of you. I'm very pleased and honored to be with you today. I was here yesterday to give some decorations to the Palms Academic to some of you were here. So I'm going to try to do not make the same discourse as yesterday, but I'm very pleased to be able to explain what we are doing right now, and maybe to see some convergences between what's going on here in the US and what's going on in France in terms of education, because I think that education is an international topic. It's not only a national or a local topic. It's now a universal topic, and it's very interesting to make international comparison and to have a look on what is improving right now in all the countries in the world and in science. That's why when I prepared a kind of program for Emmanuel Macron in terms of education, my 3 pillars were first, science. I think that we have to take into account the progress of science. It seems to be simple to say that, but in reality we do not do that so often. And especially I take a very special attention for cognitive sciences. I think that we are living a very important revolution right now of knowledge, which is the knowledge of brain. When the United States started to make a program about cognitive science, President Obama said that it was like a program about sea, because we don't know a lot of things about sea. There is a lot of things to discover about sea, and we are exactly in the same situation for the brain. We know maybe 5 or 10% of what we could know, and we are at the beginning of a new revolution. And for education, it is very important to know what are the last things that this science is telling us. It is very important because I think that we are in a moment in the history where a lot of people are saying that science is not very important, or where a lot of people say that science is bad. We are the sons and daughters of science. We are here because we believe that science gives progress. Of course, we all know that there is problems with science, that we have a problem with our planet due to some technological evolutions, but we also know that if we want to improve, we have to have the spirit of science. The spirit of science is the spirit of our political revolutions of the 18th centuries, and we are the 2 countries where this spirit has led to democracy and to the kind of regimes that we have today. So it is very coherent to have this statement to say that science is the basis of what we have to think about education if we want to improve education. The second pillar is international comparison, because a lot of countries are doing a lot of very interesting things, and we have to see what is good in the other countries, not to import directly, because very often things are very idiosyncratic in each country, but to be inspired by the success of the others. And that's what we have tried to do, looking to North America, to North Europe, to Asia, or to other countries in the world. And the third pillar is experimentation, because I think that we have to learn from experimentation, which is also a scientific approach, but also we have to learn through experience, because I think that during the last decades we have known a lot of success and failures, and we have to learn from our success and from our failures in France and in other countries. So it is very important to have this willing to improve our system through the analysis of what's going well and what's going bad. It's very simple. The three pillars are very, very simple statements, but it is a kind of methodology to go ahead. Because I think that in education we don't have to have circular debates. Very often if you open a newspaper of 30 years ago or 40 years ago, you see debates about education that look like the debates of today. And so it's not, the problem is not the newspaper of 30 years ago, it's the newspaper of today. Why do they always go in the same debates, whereas there is a lot of new things to say? For example, the impact of cognitive sciences, the dangers, the interest of that, and that's new debates, and that is very interesting. Whereas some other debates are circular. So I think that my view is that we are in the logic of an arrow and not in the logic of a circle. And that's very important if we think that we can have progress in humanity. And just to conclude this introduction, if I may say, that I think that this spirit is very important if we want to address the main question of our time, which from my point of view is how do we manage to have a more human planet, a more human world, in a world which is more and more technological? How do we manage, because we are sure that this world is becoming more and more technological, how do we manage to make this world more human? And it is not obvious. The answer is not obvious, but the first element for an answer is education. So that's the basis of my convictions.
Well, thank you for the introduction. And I appreciate your three pillars. When you think about science, when you think about international collaboration, and we think about innovation and experimentation, those are critical ways that we approach education. I also wonder about some of the outcomes related to a strong, healthy system of education, such as economic success. Our nations depend on a thriving economy to allow us to express ourselves in our humanity and to support every person in our country. So what role should economic factors play in deciding national education policy? Can you provide examples of policies that you said and how they relate to the economic prosperity that all citizens can participate in?
Well, there is a lot of aspects of your question. I think that there is, maybe we are living the end of a clear frontier between economy and society. Very often in our ways of reasoning, we think about economics and we think about the social questions, and as if it was two different questions, two different matters. And for example, if you speak about health or education, you speak about money that you have to spend for social reasons, but not for economical reasons. And on the other hand, you have the real serious economical topics like industry or energy and things like that. I think that this is changing a lot, because health and education are becoming not only waste, not only investment, but even a very important part of the production of a country. So it's very important from a social point of view, but it's also very important from an economical point of view, because our economies are totally changing right now. And if you take the example of Australia, they managed to have a very performing universities, and now this performance make being able to import, if I may say, foreign students is the first or the second element for their exportations, for their ability to have new earnings. So it shows that when you spend money in education, you don't spend. You invest, but you are doing even something more than investing. You are just growing in one of the two pillars of the economy of the future, because we know that health and education are going to be more and more important in the internal product of a country. So when you have that, when you think like that, of course, what you do in terms of education, you do it also for the economy, and you do it for the society. And of course, you have some topics that are directly related to economy. But I'll give you an example, a very illustrative example. Maybe the main measure we took with the President and the Prime Minister when we came 18 months ago was to, as you said, it was to create classrooms of 12 students in the poor suburbs when the children are 6 and 7 years old. Now, in 20% of them, which means 300,000 children in France, they are in classrooms of 12 students, because we saw some studies, some scientific studies that show us that we had to make a very special effort at the beginning of the life when they start to read and write and make math. If we want to struggle against inequalities, that is the very willingness measure to address inequalities from the beginning. Which is the first inequality is the inequality before language, and this is the idea. This is typically a social measure. But someone is in our Minister of Economy, I didn't ask him to do that, but he made the study alone, and he has shown that in 2040, so in 20 years, it will make an improvement of 1% of our GDP. So this 1 point of GDP, which is enormous, because we are working to have a real effect on those 20% of the population that today are excluded from society, but also from economy, because of the problems that they have at school at the beginning of their life, which become problems for all their life. So this shows that, of course, you don't have a frontier between a social measure and an economic measure. You do both at the same time. And to give you another example, we made a strong reform with effects within 2 years for vocational training. And of course, it has also an economical aspect, because today we think that the main factor in France to do not have a bigger growth is the fact that you don't have adequacy between training and the needs of the economy. Today you have a lot of jobs available in France with no one to take them, not because they are poor jobs or because they are not attractive, but because people have not had the good training for those jobs. So it's a pity, and of course it's bad for the society, because we have a lot of young people without jobs, and at the same time we have a lot of jobs without people. So that's, of course, if you manage to improve that, you do something good for the society and for the economy.
Well, I think you raise an interesting question about what we mean by economies, and there's economies of wealth, and there's also economies of health and well-being, right? And so we think about those personal well-being as an economy as well. And we know that that begins at a very young age. And I know an issue very close to your heart is compulsory education. So I'd like to turn the conversation to think about our youngest citizens of our countries. We know that research suggests that early education between birth and age 5 has strong results. The research has shown greater academic achievement, greater future employment, and health and well-being for children who get early education. So the impact of the care can also be measured economically, and some studies show that for every $1 we invest in early education, we save $10 in later government spending. So there's an economy of health and wealth there when we think about our youngest citizens. In New York City, our mayor has instituted universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds as a way to solve this, because we also know that the impact of early education is greatest on our most needy citizens, right? So children in poverty, children in marginalized groups. But we also worry about the quality of universal preschool. And when we introduce universal preschool, how do we know that we are targeting the right students, who are the neediest students, and not just all students? So what do you think about the issue of compulsory education and how that can be leveraged to promote equity and social progress?
So I think, of course, that it is a strong tool to address inequalities and the problems of some children at the beginning of their life. Maybe the main lesson of cognitive science is this lesson. It's the fact that a lot of very important things are at stake during the first years of your life. Between 0 and 7 years old, a lot of things are going well or bad, and what is going on is very important for the rest of your life. So it's quite clear that we have to concentrate our attention on what's going on during those 7 years. It doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything after, but you have to be very careful about about that, especially in the kind of society where we are. So that's why I advocated for a new compulsory measure in France, and the president said that we were going to make a new law to have a compulsory school from the age of 3. So next year, in 2019, we are going to pass a new law to have a compulsory school at the age of 3. I think that this will make that France will be the country in the world where you have compulsory school at the lowest age. This is we do assume that. I think that it's very important to do so for 2 reasons. The first one is, let's say, quantitative. It's the fact that today 97% of the children of France go to school at the age of 3. So some people say in France, so why are you doing that? Because 3% it's nothing. But 3% is 25,000 children a year. And so it's not nothing, 25,000 children a year. Even one child, it's not nothing. So 25,000, those 25,000 children are very poor children, or maybe they are belonging to families with some problems with the society, for example, religious extremists, crazy people, things like that. So doing that is doing something in the sense of inclusion. So it's a measure with a very important social impact. But it has also a qualitative reason to exist. This qualitative reason is that it underlines the fact, the things you said, which is that preschooler school from the age of 3 to the age of 6 is very important. So we made a very important seminar with specialists coming from different parts of France and from the different parts of the world to have a new vision about what should be the école maternelle. That's the name we give to that in France, école maternelle, pre-scholar school. And so we have a kind of new theory about école maternelle, about the importance of arts and also the importance of emotions, and the fact that it is very clear that what the main important thing for a child when he comes to school is the relationship with the teacher and the affective relationship more than knowledge. So it's very important to understand that at this moment of the life, a lot of things are going to be given to the child that are not direct knowledge, but things that are going to allow this child to have knowledge afterwards. For example, the main example is vocabulary. When a child comes to school at the age of 3, you can have a difference of 2 or 3 times of vocabulary between 2 children, depending on the families. One child with, let's say, 500 words, and the other with 1,500 words. So you have already at the age of 3 a strong inequality in terms of language. The pre-scholar school must compensate that. And if you have music, if you have poetry, if you have small novels read by someone in the school, this compensate these inequalities in terms of vocabulary. And if you have a rich vocabulary at the age of 6, when you start to learn to write and read, this is the main factor to succeed for this new knowledge. So what's going on in the pre-scholar school is very important for what's going on afterward, even if it's not direct. The idea is not to teach how to read and write at the age of 3, but to give all the elements that will allow this knowledge at the age of 6. So that's, for us, very important, and it is our main priority. When I have to say what is important for you, I always start by that.
Well, it's an amazing investment in a grand experiment, and many of us are going to be eager to see how the research plays out when we see the positive impacts. I'm assuming there are going to be many positive impacts to see in the children who attend beginning at 3. Also aligned with your thoughts about arts education and being here in New York, one of the arts capitals of the world. We're excited in our college that we offer a full arts, music, dance, theater, and we believe that children should have access to a full arts education, as well as social emotional learning, which is a large issue for us to tackle as we think about how we train new teachers, as we work in our schools. But you also mentioned the issue of inclusion, and I'd like to change the conversation to think about inclusion, because I know that France has had an influx of immigrants, with a large number of your citizens being foreign-born or the children of foreign-born immigrants, and the Muslim population in France has also increased in recent years. And similarly, we know that the racial and ethnic composition of the U.S. is changing and becoming more diverse. So you recently asserted the importance of reviving Arabic instruction in schools. And I'd like to raise the question of educational pedagogy and practice, and how you think pedagogy and practice should reflect a society's cultural diversity, and why.
So there is also a lot of aspects of your question. First of all, when I have to summarize what we have to give to the children, the image I take is to say that we have to give roots and to give wings, both. So roots are very important. And when I say that in this more and more technological world and more diverse world, we have to give tools to the children, the first thing is to give roots. So for me, roots, it means basic skills, read, write, and math, but also sociability and the fact to respect the other, and also the fact to knowing where you are coming from, to know better where you want to go. This means that we have to have a philosophy of inclusion of the children. That's why it's so important in the Republican tradition to be able to give to all the children a common sense of what is the place where they are. Sometimes I say that each classroom is a small republic, and this republic must say something about France, about the Republic of France, and the Republican spirit. Of course, you know, we have a very special history. It's ours, with some common points with the US and some different points. But for me, it's a very important challenge to be able to give this inclusion vision of belonging to the same country. This is very important because we don't manage that very well today. It has to change because very often we have children with a poor abilities in language, to read and write, and also with not a very clear vision of the country where they live. So we cannot expect them to be citizen of their country because they are French, if they don't know what they have to know about their country and if they don't love this country. So it's a big challenge for France because different problems that we have show that we have not succeeded to do so. We have to have social measure to take into account this. And for example, this measure to divide by two the classrooms in the poor suburbs, in fact, is very much a measure for migrants because they are a lot concentrated in those suburbs. So I very often go to those schools, and each time I speak with the families, with mothers and sometimes the fathers, and it's very interesting to see the psychological effect of this measure, because they feel that for the first time a public policy goes to what is the most important thing for us, their children. And it's very important because we have the first pedagogical result of this measure, which is 1 year old, because we now have children of 7 years old who benefited from this measure last year. So we see that I go into classrooms of 12 students, 12 pupils, who all, 100% of them, read and write. And the year before, the same students of 7 years old were like 50 or 60% to read and write. So it's a very important progress. But so we have this pedagogical improvement, but it's also a psychological improvement because the families feel that there is a real public policy for them. And then you have the question of the acknowledgement of the diversity of their origins. That's why there was this debate about Arabic 2 weeks ago, because I said that it was important. But do we have French journalists here, or? Because I don't want to create from here a new debate about that. But this leads to different other debates. Let's say we have something to improve, which is our ability to speak foreign languages. For example, English is the our first challenge. That's why we are going, as you can see, and as you can hear. So we have to have a primary school where everybody learns, or nearly everybody learns English. German is also a special challenge for us because we want to have more people able to learn German. But we also have to develop other languages, and Chinese, Russian, and Arabic are among our priorities for the languages that we are going to develop. And doing that, of course, we are going to give more prestige to some languages that are the mother tongue of some of our pupils, and we think that it is also very good from a psychological point of view.
Well, thank you. One question that I want to talk about is created a little more controversy in France, but also in my own home. My children, Daniel and Aaron and Isabel, were quite upset when they heard about your policy of banning cell phones, right? So I know that in France you recently passed a law banning students up to...
We are in the hardest moments of this debate.
That's right. So, banning cell phone and tablet use for children up to 15 years old. And I've got a quote that you said, mobile phones are a technological advancement, but they cannot monopolize our lives. We know that our society is becoming more complex around the use of technology, that cyberbullying and access to inappropriate materials, children's lack of socialization, these are all issues that we worry about with technology creeping into every part of their lives. But some folks really think that technology must play an important role in how we educate. So I wonder if you could address a little bit of the controversy in the cell phone ban, but also the issue of technology as a pedagogical tool. So how can we resolve those tensions between not allowing technology to dominate our children's lives, but use them skillfully and artfully as a pedagogical tool in classrooms?
Well, of course, my view is not turned to the past. As I said before, I think that the question is how do we prepare a more human world with these technological characteristics? So, of course, we have to take into account the technologies. When recently I had to make a discourse about that, about our vision about technology in and especially digital technologies in the new education system of France. And the two key words I used were protection and ambition. And we need both. Protection because, of course, we have to protect. We all know that there is a lot of dangers in this new situation. We all know that you have addiction to screens. Now, from the beginning of the life, everybody can see that in the supermarket when you are waiting to pay with children with the cell phone of their parents, because it's easier to give a cell phone than to speak with the child. So we all know that we have this kind of social phenomenon, and it's a very, very big problem in reality. We all, when you speak with teachers of pre-scholar schools or of primary schools, they all tell you that children are changing right now because of these phenomena. And it is not very good evolutions. So we have to protect them from screen. Protect them from screen doesn't mean that you protect them from digital technologies, because you have, for example, some digital technologies without screen. If you take a robot, it's without screen, and it can be very powerful for pedagogy. You can have, for example, for autism, you have very good use of robots with small children. So you have to make a difference between good and bad use of technology for the children, even for the smallest. So it's not simple. You have to always make this distinction. But we have to protect against addiction. We have to protect for data. It's a very strong problem because we all know that today there is a challenge about protection of data, and the first aspect of this problem is what's going on with the children in the schools, with the GAFAs taking all the data, able to tell you something about you even when you are 6 years old, and so on and so forth. So, of course, our system, the French system, has to protect the children about the use of their data by other actors than the school. And it's a very important problem all over the world. We also have to protect them about cyberbullying. You mentioned that. About pornography, because now we have we know that half of the children at the age of 9 have seen something, a pornographic image. This is very bad phenomenon. So protection is a very important dimension. But also we have to be ambitious. We have to prepare them really to be citizens of this world. And to do so, we have to give them a strong culture on digital skills. And in reality, we often have very artificial discourses about the digital natives, because we said all the children are digital natives. But when you see what's going on, you see that it is very often superficial use of digital technologies. They don't know how to code. They don't know a lot of things about computers. So the real policy is to give them strong skills about digital skills, and also to give them an education about the good use of technologies. And that's what we are going to do, that we are doing right now, with coding at the primary school, with a new reform of the lycée, of the high school, with new disciplines. Digital is going to be a discipline in our high schools from the next year. So it's very important to have this strong ambition. So to manage to have moments without technology, to manage to have moments with technology, and during those moments it's real technology, not superficial technology, but deep technology.
One issue that we face is how we educate teachers. Often they're my age and have not grown up as digital natives. Do you have national policies or programs to prepare teachers to be able to do coding in their classroom, to use technology in wise and important ways? How are you tackling that problem?
So it's a question of initial training and also continuous training of the teachers. We are preparing right now a reform for the training of teachers, which will start next year. And at the core of this reform, there is the question of the digital school skills of the teachers. So for us, it's very important, and it will be part of the curricula of the future teacher.
Could you expand on that? In the U.S., it's a controversial issue about how we're educating teachers. Traditional university programs versus quicker pathways to teach, and often they weigh issues of content knowledge, pedagogy, and clinical practice. I know that in France you've had the rise of teacher education institutions over the last 30 years. What do you anticipate as directions for teacher education in France? What are the core directions that you see teacher education evolving?
So it's a very important topic. All the studies show that there is two main factors to have a good scholar system. The main one is the training of the teachers. The other one is the good relationships between families and schools. We are not, to be frank, we are not very good on those two factors in France right now, and it's two factors that we want to improve during the next years. So we are working hard to do so. We are going to have a new law next year, the same law. It will be the same for compulsory school and the other one, the same law for the new system to train teachers. This law will have two pillars. One pillar is against science. It's the idea that in our institutions to train teachers, we must have the best science skills. When I say science, I mean the scientific basis of pedagogy. That's, for me, very important. It's coherent with what I said at the beginning. And we don't have that today. So this is it's for me the main point. But the second pillar is to have a clinical approach and to have practitioners as teachers of the future teachers. Very often today, the teachers of the teachers are very theoretical, and they don't have themselves classrooms. So I want that more than half of the teachers are teachers. That's very important. But so the ideal school of teachers of the future for me is a school where you have at the same time the best researchers in cognitive sciences, for example, and also the best practitioners. That's why we can make a comparison with medical studies. You know, when you go to the clinician, you trust in your clinician because you know that this person, when this person studied in the past, this person was trained by professors who were at the same time clinicians, practitioners. And you know also that those professors of your clinician were people reading articles about stomach, about brain, about arms, about the human being. If this person has not done that, you don't trust that it's a good clinician for you. So you want them to be the best in scientific terms. Why don't we expect that from the teachers? You know, we should expect exactly the same. Of course, with the clinicians, we are very we expect a lot because it's a question of life or death. But with the teachers, we should expect the same, which means a very good training with a scientific pillar and a practical pillar.
I think those are similar issues that we're struggling with. I'm so delighted I brought the director of clinical experiences from my own staff tonight. And in New York State, we're revising clinical standards for our teachers to align with the best models we know about clinical practice so that they do get the rich scientific base of teaching and pedagogy, but also that clinical practice from the beginning of their experience in being educated as teachers.
I'm very interested by that, of course, and maybe it's the beginning of something tonight, but because I think that in the future we should be able to train teachers between two countries. I think that in the future we should be able to have your institution and the French institution able to exchange about their best practice, and also to be able to have American and French students here in the US and there in France able to teach in both countries, to circulate. I think it can be the kind of project that we are going to encourage in the future.
That's wonderful. And I want to ask my last question and tie that thread back to where you started your talk tonight. We know that PISA and TIMSS are two international measures of student achievement, and every 2 or 3 years in the United States press we have a flurry of media reports on where do we stand in comparison to other countries on TIMSS and PISA. And it becomes almost a competition between nations. Who's ranked higher, who's doing better. But we also have this strong research base. So we know places where education is going well, and we have a strong scientific research base on what good pedagogy means and what good pedagogical practices we should be implementing. So in your position of minister, how do you envision nations working together? You just presented an interesting idea about teacher education practices. Do you have other ways that we could do cross-national work so that we don't see each other as competitors around test scores, but rather as embodying the best in work in education to serve all our students?
Yes, I think that your vision is consistent with what I said at the beginning when I said that thanks to international comparison we could improve our systems. So I think that we have to avoid the competition approach between nations and to take advantage of those studies to cooperate. That's very important for me. Of course, I read a lot about PISA and TIMSS, and I pay a lot of attention to that. But I also want to have national well-done evaluations. That's what's going on right now in France. We create a new evaluations at different moments of the life of the pupils. It's a debate right now in France, but we have done that thanks to a new scientific council that I created 1 year ago with 21 persons, 21 of the best researchers in different fields like psychology, language, cognitive sciences, and sociology, and so on and so forth. So they conceived the new evaluation system. And I'm expecting a lot of things from this new evaluation system. When you see the different surveys, you see like two models in the world. The best countries are belonging to two regions, Asia and North Europe, and in a certain way North America. And it's very interesting to see that it corresponds to two very different models. I will be very schematic and it's caricatural, but in the Asia model is a model based on work and efforts and so on and so forth, whereas the North European model is based on pleasure and so on and so forth. So that's and you know, in our national debates, especially in the French debate, but I think it's the same in the States. You have the same structure. You have people for pleasure and people for effort. Whereas I think that we have to have both. So my ambition for France is to say that we have a strong scholar history, a strong tradition that allow us, and cultural tradition, that allow us to have the two good aspects. The Cartesian aspect, the logic, the effort, the ability to have a progressive system with a strong vision of the curriculum, and on the other hand, and it is not contradictory, to develop arts, culture, creativity. We are the country of Descartes, but we are also the country of Picasso. We are able to have those two things, and you are able to. The US, we could say more or less the same for the US. And so for me, it's very important to take advantage of those surveys, not to make the imitation of the others, but to take in our own tradition the elements that are the constituencies of the success of the others. I think that now, if you see the different countries in the world, there is one country that has managed to do something like that, with a very different history. And this country is Singapore, because they are coming from the Confucian tradition, the Asian tradition, so they have a lot of, let's say, qualities that are here in terms of logic, in terms of philosophy of work, and so on and so forth. But they had the good idea to make a lot of international comparison, to see what are the factors of creativity, of innovation, and they managed to mix the two dimensions, and they managed also to have a good, I think, a very good teacher training system. And so now we see the kind of results it gives. It's not an ideal system, because there is no ideal. You can see some weaknesses everywhere. But I think they give us a good idea of what you manage to have, the improvements you manage to have when you make international studies, and when you always are able to transform your system thanks to this international comparison.
Yes, I think there's something to that notion of multiple pathways to success. And as you said earlier, there's no way to replicate the success of one place in another place. You have to think about your own unique tradition and culture. But I think in those cross-country comparisons, as you stated, there's a value for exploration, creativity, building on mistakes and learning from them to gain mastery, right? Whether that's in the arts or, that effortful use of experimentation. Is what underlies that success. I also want to stop and thank you for a moment for the work you're doing, inviting researchers to the table to help create education policy. I know that that's many of us who are researchers by training place great value in the work we do and its potential impact for policy and practice, but it's often overlooked in the way education policy is created. So I appreciate your approach on that. And thank you for the very thoughtful answers to my questions. And I'd love to hear what some of the questions in the audience might be. Yes. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much to both of you, and thank you very much to our This is the lane. Oh, sorry. Good evening. Thank you both for your wonderful presentation, and thank you to our very hospitable hosts. My name's Francis. I have the pleasure of being a public high school teacher in Australia. Just as you can probably tell by the accent, my apologies if you find it hard to understand. My own kids don't understand me sometimes. Just a question with regards to civics education. So, the, I guess, rise of authoritarianism around the world, Russia, China, as such examples. So I guess a lack of, I guess, understanding and appreciation of liberal democratic values, or certainly a reduction in that, which should be of concern to us. And also knowing that a lack of civics, good civics education, disempowers students disproportionately from low socioeconomic backgrounds, which then disempowers them later on in life, and thus, I guess, perpetuates the cycle of intergenerational inequality. So pointing to best practice examples, how do both of you believe that we can, I guess, strengthen civics education, particularly for kids from poorer backgrounds, so to speak? And in this new spirit of international cooperation and education, would love to welcome both of you, and indeed everyone here, to come and meet my wonderful students at Caldwell High School in Australia. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I do buy your offer. I think it's a very important topic, and it's not a strength in France today. This topic, I think that the US are more advanced, and because you have a strong tradition of community service and a strong tradition of engagement of the child or the pupil in the community. Whereas in France, it's not so developed, and sometimes it is, but it's not homogeneously developed. So I have some ideas for the future to develop engagement. I'm not only the Minister of National Education, I'm also the Minister of what we call in France youth and associations. It means that I have also to deal with all the question of extrascholar activities. For example, the Wednesday is a very special day in France where you don't have school in general, so it's very important to develop sport, culture, natural activities, and also community service. And it's something that I'm going to strengthen in the future, especially in a context where we are going to create, because it has been said by the president before being elected, that we will create a new national service. At the age of 16, you will spend 1 month to be engaged in a kind of community service, and also with the spirit of defense, but also the spirit of serving the community. So with this new institution in the future, in the next 2 years, we are going to think about the existence of a community service spirit from the age of 11 to the age of 18. So yes, of course, I'm interested by the American experiences in that field. And last year I visited some places with this kind of experience, and maybe yours is very interesting for me. Yes.
So I would love to visit. Thank you for the invitation. But one thing I wanted to say is that democracy is an advanced concept. And just like most advanced concepts, we don't just jump into those. And my question is, how are we preparing young people for advanced citizenry when they're in their local experiences? So how are we designing classrooms where children have some say in what they're studying and how they approach their work? How do they understand their rights and responsibilities as citizens in a classroom and school? And how do we allow them to exercise that in meaningful ways? And I think when young children and adolescents get the sense that they are empowered to make decisions, that they can participate and criticize and help form the rules that govern them from day to day, they start to get a really strong sense of that and can develop that into more national advanced practices of citizenry.
Yes, thank you very much for a fascinating discussion tonight. Thank you. I have a question, Monsieur le Ministre, regarding, do you have in the French curriculum a class, because we spoke about cell phone and about social media. So do you have a specific course for the children and for the students to better know how to analyze the news? We're talking about fake news right now, and I think it's very important. So maybe for the middle school, or there is an organization, for example, here called News Literacy Project, which is a non-profit organization founded by some American journalists. And I've been to one of their classes in Harlem. They go, and it's a class after-school programs, actually, where they train the teachers and where the students to better analyze the news. And I think this is a very important factor nowadays. So I would like to know if you have such a thing in the French education program. Thank you.
Yes, of course, this topic is very important. It's every day more and more important because of all the bad phenomena we know, especially fake news and all the problems of what is information today. So it is not a marginal topic. It's not something you do when you have done all the other things, but it is something that now is at the core of what we have to give to a child. I think that there is different elements of the answer. The first one is the fact that we have to give basic skills. We must not forget that this is the first thing we have to do. If you are not able to read, if you have not a rich vocabulary, you can do the best things in terms of education to the media and so on and so forth. You don't have the basis to be a citizen of this world. So that's why sometimes when I say that, people think that I'm a guy of the past and I'm a 19th century guy. I don't think so. I think that I'm very modern because, anyway, I don't mind because what is important is to have the base. If you don't have the basic skills, you are a slave for all the fake news actors of our time. So I'm very convinced about that, and that's why I'm so dedicated to this question of what's going on for the youngest children in terms of basic skills. So first, basic skills. Second, culture. That's why classical humanities are so important for the children. If they have if all the children have classical humanities, they have tools to be able to analyze information. Again, you can see this is a 19th century guy because when I say that, I speak about Greek, I speak about Latin, I speak about literature, I speak about music, I speak about the arts in general. This is very important, and also it's a social question again, because we have to give that to the poorest children, because the richest will have that through their family, the poorest won't. So this is a very, from my point of view, it's a progressist approach to say that. The third thing is that we have to give the new humanities, and the new humanities means what we said before about real strong digital skills. And within those new humanities, I put the things you said, the education to medias. And but this will work more if you have the two previous pillars. That's why we are going to put that at the core of the curricula. We already do some things about that, but we will do more in the future and train the teachers for that. And to conclude about that, I think that there is also a traduction of that, which is the place physically and symbolically of the library in the school. I think it's very important for a school to have the library at the center. And if it's possible to have physically the library at the center, is very important. And this library, and I use the word library at purpose, it's a place which at the same time must be very traditional, with books, silence, concentration, and at the same time there is another half of the place which is digital, for collective work, with noise, music, what you want, a place where you are happy to be because you are going to interact with the others. And you do not oppose the two things. You think that that is, you have here the two aspects of life. And this must be the art of the institution of knowledge, the school. And this is very important to make this place as the center and the place where you go with pleasure. That's, for me, very important. And it is the main tool to make the education, this kind of education I mentioned.
Thank you. I know your time is short. Do we have time for one more question tonight? Okay, one more. Yes.
Thank you very much. I am mathematics professor in an French and American, teaching in an American university. You spoke about the link between education and economy. In this country, France has a tremendous reputation for producing the best mathematicians. I mean, we know we have as many, we share with the US actually the number of fields, top number of fields medalists in the world. Yet, I have observed in France a kind of decline in the level of, for instance, the mathematics asked at the baccalaureate, you know, going from reasoning to merely calculating. What do you think, what do you have in mind to prevent this decline?
So I do agree with all the things you said. It's true we are a mathematical nation, nation of mathematicians for a long time, and we still have a very good elite in mathematics. France is still the country with the most important number of fields medals. So so this is a good strength of France, but there is a risk of weakening our this ability of France. So that's why we made a reform on math. This reform has been inspired by one of our best mathematicians and very famous, Cédric Villani, who at the same time is a member of the parliament in our majority. So it's someone we love for two reasons. And he made a report. This report, I think we are going to translate it in English. We do it in Spanish too, because it's a very well done report to have a new strategy to teach mathematics. Singapore made a great work in that direction also. So this is changing the way we think the curriculum in the primary school and in the secondary school. In the primary school, it means that we are going to have new strategies with at the same time more games, more pleasure, to give the sense of mathematics to everybody, and at the same time more how do you say that? More demand, which means, for example, I have said publicly that we want the children of 6 years old to be able to do the 4 operations. This is it's also a social question for the same reason as the previous question, and so we are going to leverage the demand, and you will also see that through the new program of the high school in France, because it's changing right now, and we take into account the kind of observations you just made that are made by in general by the university professors. They say that there is a lowering of the level, so we took that into account, and you will have more hours in mathematics and with more content. This is also one of the aspects of the important reform we made about high school, because the new high school in France is going to look like more the American high schools, because we will end with a system where you have to choose between three, let's say three lobbies, three tracks, and in each track you have the same amount of hours. So you have the scientific track, the economic track, and the literature track. And now you will have a system where you choose more the disciplines you take. You choose 3 disciplines during 1 year and 2 the year after. But you will be able to deepen more the discipline you have chosen. This means that you have at the same time more freedom, but also more content. So that's very important for us to have both. So more pleasure and more effort. So that's maybe the synthesis of what I have to say.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you in New York, and thank you for your inspired leadership and service in education. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.